let's talk about the vice president choice. If you were advising Obama, would you ask him to, would you suggest that he give consideration to a woman? Would you suggest he put Hillary on the ticket? Would you suggest that he include someone from the South? What kinds of things do you think he ought to be looking at in making his choice for vice president?
Well, I think if he wants to be taken seriously and he wants to be looking at the post-racial candidate for president, he can't just load his ticket up as a gender race ticket. I know Hillary Clinton, by most measures, eminently qualified to be president of the United States, but they're oil and water. They don't mix. And so to search out the country just for a woman, I would advise against that. And I would say to him, find someone that can help you gain credibility so that you can govern. And that would be the likes of Joe Biden in Delaware, who I think is, I always describe him as a political beast. Mm-hmm. There is nothing like watching him give an interview. He calls the president out, without a script, and in a very careful, and has the credibility to do it, and he has the weight to do it, and he has the seriousness to do
but
it.
But how could he attract? Could he attract southern states? You think?
Well, see, this is getting back to a point that Guy made earlier on the question as to whether or not we're president. I don't think the country has to be ready. We just need enough states to be ready.
270 electoral votes.
I don't think Mississippi or Texas is ever going to come along for the ride for this election, and so be it. Right? The question is whether or not Joe Biden or some other Democratic vice presidential candidate can help him in states like Iowa and Missouri and states that are on the precipice of making the decision that race doesn't matter when it comes to the president they want to change.
Yeah, I completely agree with Al. I mean, I think there are two questions that Barack Obama think about. The first one concerns the gender issue because it's a question that has to be joined on two sides. On the one hand, women, especially Democratic women, haven't gotten their enthusiasm back. They should, but they haven't gotten it quite back. They're still mourning from the loss of Hillary Clinton. Now, the chances that they're going to defect to McCain is not very high, but you definitely don't want people thinking about staying home. You want them engaged. You want them involved. So I think that's one, at the very least, he has to make a pretense that he's looking at women very seriously. There's got to be some names leaked out there, whether they're serious or not, but the names are going to be leaked out there just for show to send a message to Democratic women, hey, we're taking this seriously. On the other hand, a Democratic ticket headed by a woman, a black man, and a white woman, presumably it's going to be a white woman, it's not going to be a black woman, headed by a white man, a black man, and a white woman, is definitely a ticket where they're going to be counting 270 very carefully.
And they may be counting them late into the night.
Right, they will be counting them late into the night.
Yeah.
It is not one in which that's going to play very well across a broad swath of America. And that's just a political reality. So Barack Obama needs to find a white guy that's going to buy him some credibility. Joe Biden is great. Evan Bayh is from Indiana, the senator from Indiana. A lot of people have been talking about a whole list of individuals that would love to be considered. There's no one who's obvious. Sam Nunn. Yeah. There's no quite obvious. A Southerner, easily from North Carolina, is a name that has been bandied about. He's a Southerner.
Yeah.
North Carolina might be in play with a large black population there. So he's got to find himself a very nice, smart, articulate white man to put on that ticket.
Well, I was about to. You guys don't seem to give any reason to put one on a ticket who can attract southern states at all. You seem to think the other things are more important.
Well, there are certain southern states that are in play. Guy mentioned North Carolina, Georgia may be in play, Virginia may be in play. But we've got to face the realities that states like Mississippi and Tennessee and Texas are not coming along. They wouldn't come along for a white Democratic candidate.
How about the governor of Kansas? Do you think that
Kathleen Sebelius?
Yeah, you think that would?
Well, again, I mean, what I worry about if I were his strategist, what I would worry about is how do you sell in this day and age a ticket with a black man and a woman? I think that's difficult. Now, Barack's campaign, they've done the good job of walking that race line. So now to add a gender line to it that you have to walk, I mean, that's taking chances. In my heart of hearts, I think you should pick the most qualified individual. But if you're trying to win, you have to be attuned to the political realities. And if there's a campaign that's attuned to the political realities, that campaign definitely is.
That it is.
I want to take a moment to remind our viewers that I'm talking politics. As you can tell, with A.L. Brown, a political analyst, and G.Charles, who is also a political analyst. Let's move to new subject here. What about Obama and Clinton campaigning together. Good idea?
Well, it's a necessary idea, particularly before the convention. Guy mentioned that the women vote hasn't found its affection yet for the Democratic Party. A lot of scorned middle-aged white women who don't like or feel like Senator Clinton was discriminated against because of her gender. Yeah, that's a very important part of this political process for Barack Obama, is to become the leader. You know, you got to remember, he's not just a candidate; he's a leader of a party. And so this is going to have an impact on the ticket downstream. All of this has to be taken into account. And she's a terribly popular figure. I mean, she showed one thing in that election: she's tough, and she's smart, and she's tough, and she's smart, independent of her relationship with President Clinton. So yeah, see, he needs to hit the trail yesterday with her.
And I recall at the beginning of the primary season, you know, the Democrats were jumping for joy. They were talking about an abundance of riches. You know, everybody was saying, "Oh, like any one of these candidates." In fact, Art, if you had been a candidate, any one of these candidates, we would be happy to have. At the end of the season, you have a relatively divided Democratic Party. You have African Americans, for example, thinking that the Clintons went over the line too many times on race. You have women thinking that that the Obama campaign and the media went over the line too many times on gender. You have independents for whom Barack Obama was a natural attraction, wondering, Reverend Wright, you know, what's going on with a number of these things. So you have a relatively divided base, and the time has come, if not past, to bring them together and to get back that shine that was on the party at the beginning of the primaries, because there's no doubt that some of that luster is now gone. Barack Obama is a bruised candidate. Hillary Clinton is a bruised individual, and they need to bring that party back together. And by campaigning together, they at least will pretend that there's unity. They're not going to question it, but at least you have to show that, hey, we believe in unity.
Gio and I, we've talked a lot about the red and blue states. Is that still as prevalent as it has been in other elections? Has this election made a difference in the increase of the red and blue?
That's a great question, and the assumption is that that you no longer have the sharp division that you used to have, and because someone like Barack Obama might put in play some of those, let's say, western states that were Republican, or some of those southern states that I already talked about, such as Virginia, North Carolina, et cetera, that lean Republican, and that the assumption is also that a maverick and independent like John McCain is going to put into play some of the Democratic states. So you have a lot more purple and a lot less red and blue. You know, it's yet to be seen. I mean, one of the questions of this campaign is going to be whether campaigns in fact make a difference. Right? They're getting these candidates out there. Are they going to turn some of these states around, or do people really have their identities, simply looking for the candidate to attach to those identities? So the question is, and it's a great question, do these things matter? To some extent, I think they do, but the proof is going to be in the pudding, and it's going to be at the end of the election season.
You know, I almost think the red-blue state, and I think about how the part, it started as the media's way of explaining who won which state. And you think about how far we've taken that. It was what I call media laziness, as opposed to putting the alphabet in the letters, saying George Bush won Texas, and Al Gore won Illinois. They say define them as red and blue for this, so that we could see it and have a visual representation. That has now become the definition of the politics in this country. Are you a red, or are you a blue state? I think I find it ridiculous. You take, for instance, Minnesota. You look back at the 2004 election. Minnesota's traditionally thought of as a blue state. They joke about it being a toss-up state, but it's traditionally. But even in Minnesota with George Bush, it wasn't a blowout between John Kerry and George Bush. I think it was a 5-point spread or something to that effect. And so I don't think the country is as divided as the media has done us a disservice with the red-blue state pictorial for analyzing who won what state.
And some analysts will tell you it's the counties that matter more than the states. That within a state you have counties that go different ways. And as county, for example, here in Minnesota, the inner ring suburbs, used to be relatively conservative, if not fairly conservative, and now a lot of them are liberal. And so the counties matter, and the geographies might matter more than sort of the larger geography than the state.
And I think when you click on the maps, the maps bear you out on that point. You can almost trace counties to urban versus rural. I mean, what we really got in the country is people who live in the city and people who live out in the farms and who live out in rural America. And perspectives are completely different on just about every issue. I mean, those who live out on the farms love the government for farm aid and all the farming subsidies. But you talk to them about guns and they say, "Don't touch my gun." Yeah. But then you come to the city, and Democrats want you to get rid of guns as soon as possible.
Or you go to D.C. and they say, "Look, if you draw a picture of a gun, it's illegal."